I really should finish that digital Aerochrome script I started like a year ago for my full spectrum camera. And, ooh, look, a Green Days video. Damn it. So the idea of having a true digital Aerochrome system using my full spectrum Z6 is something I've actually been working on for like over a year, based on the article by Pierre-Louis Ferrer and JW Wong's IRG image transform. But I struggled to get it working properly. I was able to get it to work in Photoshop somewhat, but I am a lazy git and I didn't want to have to Photoshop every image. Now I had another stab at this when I was using an orange filter and using the tools in DaVinci Resolve to create Aerochrome video, but that also failed. And it was because I was missing something from the process. And then our Lord Jason came down and gave me the last piece of the puzzle. And now I have created a reliable, fast, easy method of creating true digital Aerochrome images and video in one exposure. Fair warning here, this video is going to get technical from here on out, and if that scares you, well, tough titties. So for this process, you're going to need a full spectrum converted cameras, and you can't do this with a normal camera, you have to have a full spectrum camera. I'm using my second-hand Z6 that I bought in Nakano in Tokyo. Now, I actually converted this camera to full spectrum by myself, and I actually made a video about it as well. And involves swapping out the sensor's IR cut filter for a piece of clear quartz so the camera can see infrared light. Next, we need a yellow filter. I actually use a Tiffin Yellow 12 filter, but I think maybe there are other brands of filter out there that would be better. So the theory on how this works is by looking at how Aerochrome captures light in each emulsion layer and then figuring out how to recreate that digitally. So Aerochrome is an IRG to RGB film. It records infrared, red and green light and maps those to the red, green and blue dyes to create a color infrared image. Now ideally our digital Aerochrome camera will be able to capture separate infrared, red and green light, and then we could just change the channels around in post. But that's not possible because of the Bayer filter, which makes color digital photography possible but limits us to RGB channels. However, when we remove the IR filter from the camera, it's now capturing the red plus infrared channel, green plus infrared channel, and blue plus infrared channel. And this is important because if you've ever shot Aerochrome, you know that you need to use a yellow filter on the lens to filter out the blue light from the exposure. So when we put the yellow filter on the camera, we can filter out blue light, and that means that our red, green, and blue channels are now capturing a red plus infrared, green plus infrared, and a separate infrared signal in the blue channel. And with this separated signal, it's now possible to mathematically subtract it from the green and red channels to give us an infrared red-green capture, just like Aerochrome. Then we just need to reassign the channels and we should have a digital Aerochrome. So with the theory in place, we need to set up the camera. And the first step in that is waiting for a rare sunny day in Ireland. But once this happened, I headed out with a yellow filter on the lens, and I made sure to remove the 720nm in-body filter I left in during one of my tests and was wondering why it went wrong all of a sudden. The next thing we need to do is white balance the camera, but you cannot trust the camera with this at all. So you have to take a white balance reading off of a neutral surface like white clouds or concrete. You could also use a grey card or a Sony lens cap, but I'm not that organized to bring a grey card or a Sony pleb. I also set the camera to use the flat picture profile. And now at this point, the camera image should look like this with a blue magenta foliage and a sickly green yellow tinted sky. Now, there are some other ideas I have for this process. I'm currently trying out a 550nm orange filter instead of using a yellow filter, which removes some green light, and seeing how that works. I actually really want to get this to work because Kolari makes a 550nm in-body filter for the Z6. So if I can get that to work, it means I can use that filter and then I can use every lens I own and get that Aerochrome look. After shooting, I now have to transform these hideous raw images into glorious Aerochrome. And the first step of this process is actually to import it into NX Studio. So the first step in NX Studio is to cull the images I don't want, and I just do that by rating the images 1 star to mark the ones I want to keep. Select them all, make sure they're set to the flat picture profile. That gives us more leeway in editing. And then we're going to export all these images as TIFFs. Now, the reason I'm exporting these as TIFFs is because the script I'm using to do the conversion on these uses ImageMagick, and working with raw images in ImageMagick is painful to use, so I just avoid it. So we're going to export these 16-bit TIFFs into my Aerochrome processing folder. Excellent. I'm going to click export, and that will generate our TIFF images. Now, for the initial processing of these files, I am using a command line tool called ImageMagick and Windows batch scripts to automate the process. Now, microshit Wangblows's batch scripts are terrible to write and are barely legible at the best of times. As for ImageMagick itself, it's actually an amazing command line image processing tool. I actually use it all the time to automate stuff. Like in my videos where I show images with the white border and grey background, I actually have a batch script that generates all of those in about 10 seconds from a folder of JPEGs using ImageMagick. It makes things a lot easier, and I use it for all kinds of image processing. Anyway, back to the Aerochrome processing. So I just activate the script in the same folder that all my images are in, and it creates the Aerochrome images, which are close enough that I can import them into Lightroom and just edit them as normal pictures. And if we go into our Aerochrome folder, we can see we have our Aerochrome images. Oh, you want to see the script and how it works? Well, I suppose I could go through it for old time's sake. So the first part of this script is just setting up some variables like the processing folder name, the output folder, and some of the attenuation variables. We'll get to those a little later on. And this part here is just a simple for loop, which just loops over all the TIFFs one after the other and processes them all sequentially, which allows me to do batch processing. So the first actual meat and potatoes part of the script is this section here, which just deletes the processing folder and everything in it to clear out old files, and then it creates a new processing folder, which is empty, and it creates our output folder if it hasn't been already created, and we copy our currently working file into the processing folder for, well, processing. And here is where we actually start using ImageMagick. So our first 3 lines here are actually the same line multiple times, and all this does is separate the image into 3 black and white images. One for the red channel, one for the green channel, and one for the blue channel. Then we need to take this blue channel, and we're going to create 2 copies of it with the IR attenuated down by about 50%. And we're going to drop the contrast on this a little bit as well. Now, the reason this is needed is because the IR light is actually very overpowering on a CMOS sensor due to how sensitive it is to IR light. So we need to tone this down in order for the image to come out reasonably well balanced. So to do that, we just take in our IR channel, lower the brightness by our blue attenuation, which is minus 50%. Then we're going to drop the contrast using the sigmoidal contrast setting, and we're going to drop this down by 4 by 50, which just means move halfway up the tone curve and drop it by 4. And then we're going to do the exact same thing again, but we're going to use the green attenuation. Now, I actually have these set here both to minus 50. The reason I've separated these is because sometimes in certain situations, the green actually needs to be attenuated a little bit more. But I found that working with 50% works pretty well for both of them. So I've kept them separate in the script for convenience sake. The next step is to compose the channels together so that we can subtract away these IR images from the red and green channels to give us our final blue and green channel. So to do this, we take our IR sub B as our source. We're going to take the destination, which is our IR, our red channel with infrared. And then we're going to composite these images together using the compose filter of minus destination, which is all set here. And that creates our final green channel. Then we're going to take our green IR channel with the sub G, and we're going to use the same minus destination to create our final blue channel. So now that we've attenuated all the channels, subtracted everything away, and set everything up, we now just need to recombine all our final images into our final color image. And that is done by taking our final infrared channel and putting it in the red position, taking our final green channel and putting it in the green position, and taking our final blue channel and putting it in the blue position. And then using the combine operator, we can just combine all these together and create our Aerochrome TIFF image. And then the script just goes back to the top of the loop and does it all again for the next TIFF. And again until it runs out of TIFFs to process. Now, if we actually take a look at the final images, we can see that it's not perfect. It's rather flat and has a bit of a color tint, but it is close enough that we can import this into Lightroom and just start editing it like a normal image. So now in Lightroom, all we need to do is adjust the color balance a little bit. So I'm just going to white balance off the clouds to make those white. And then I'm just going to use the auto setting, bring up the contrast a little bit, maybe bring down the exposure a hair. I find I just need to fiddle with it a little bit, but not much. And I'm just doing this very quickly. And as you can see, we get a quite nice Aerochrome image. Take this one here of the deer. And we're just going to bring up the contrast a good bit. Bring down the shadows a hair. Blacks, bring up the whites. Use the dehaze to bring a bit more local contrast in. I found I need to do this quite a bit on my Aerochrome images because if I don't, they look really weird. Let's bring the saturation up a hair. And here we have our digital Aerochrome deer. And lastly, we're just going to do the heron. So we're just going to color correct it. Maybe not. I don't know if that's supposed to be doing infrared light, but we're just going to auto contrast. I think I might. No, it actually looks really quite good like that. I think this should be white here. Nope. A little bit of dehaze, a little bit of clarity and texture. Bring the shadows up a little bit. Put a little bit more exposure on it. And there we have our Aerochrome heron. And that is pretty much my process for creating digital Aerochrome images. Now, as for this script, it is super handy and it takes a lot of the manual Photoshop work out of this process. And because I am such a generous, benevolent person, I've actually added a page to my website where you'll be able to find the script. I will also upload it to GitHub as well, if I remember to. I'm sure a comment will remind me that I haven't uploaded it to if I forget. So when I'm dealing with video, it's the same process in theory, but instead of using a script, I'm going to do it entirely in DaVinci Resolve because I use it as my main editor and it actually works. Unlike Premiere, which is less stable than a tin mine in a supernova. Now when I'm shooting the videos, I use the exact same settings in camera I use for stills with the white balance set off the clouds. So once we've imported our footage, all I need to do is take it and drop it onto the timeline. And the first thing I'm going to do is create an adjustment clip to set above everything, which is where we're going to do all our processing. I'm just going to rename this yellow and call it Aerochrome. And then we need to move on to the color tab. So the reason this is actually really easy to do in DaVinci Resolve is because it uses this node-based editor that I really like. So first I'm going to take this default node and use it to adjust the white balance if I need to. I've already set this in camera, so I don't need to do it, but I can fine tune it a little bit if needed. Or you can use this to adjust the white balance any way you want if you're a baller and have a full spectrum camera that can shoot raw video. Anyway, our next step is to take a channel splitter, like so, which splits the image into red, green, and blue channels. And then we're just going to add a node to each one of these. And the next thing we need to do is take our infrared channel and attenuate down that brightness again. So I'm actually going to lower this down to 0.5. So now with the IR channel attenuated, we're going to split it into the sub B and sub G channels. So sub G will be subtracted from the red to give our final green channel, and this will give our sub B will be mapped to the green, so that will give us our final green channel. Yep. Then I'm just going to add one last node. I'm just going to call this IR adjust. Now we need to combine these two channels together while subtracting one from the other. So we're just going to take our Resolve FX transform, drop it in. And in the top one, we're going to feed our red channel, delete that link. Then we're going to feed in the subtract G. And now we go to the advanced options, composite type, subtract. And that gives us our final red channel. Now we're going to add another node, and we're going to call this final G for green, and then we're going to add a combiner node, and we're going to feed that into the green slot of the combiner node, and we're going to feed that to our output. So that's our green channel all set up. Now we need to do all the same again. So we're going to take our green plus IR, put that in, take our subtraction of blue, node, it's going to create our final blue, and this is red minus green minus IR, final blue, and feed that into the blue. Then we take our final IR adjustment and we're just going to feed that straight into the red channel. And there we have it. We're getting somewhere. I was struggling here for a little bit. I couldn't quite figure out why the image looked all magenta, and that just means that the green channel wasn't being subtracted correctly. So it turns out that I actually set the composite type incorrectly. Now that we've set our green minus IR to subtract, we can see that we've got our Aerochrome image, but it's very dark. And this is kind of typical when you're shooting, because the IR signal is so overpowering to all the channels. It actually makes the camera underexpose quite a bit. So to get away with this, I'm just going to bring up my gain quite a bit, and we're going to just bring up the offset a little bit as well. And that just creates a slightly better exposed looking image with our nice red foliage and everything set up. Then we're just going to go in here to our final node and do a little bit of white balance adjustment, and we can adjust the contrast and things to taste. But if we go through our various clips, we can see that in some of them the Aerochrome effect is very overpowering. So we can actually adjust that a little bit by just taking the IR channel, and we can fiddle with the offset to attenuate it a bit more, to bring it in a little bit more reasonable. And I think about there might be good. We can also play with the gain a little bit. But yeah, I think that looks much better. It's not nearly as crazy looking as before, where the IR channel was very overpowering. I'm also keeping an eye on my waveforms here. So that looks pretty good. Looks much cleaner. The heron image looks really nice as well. It's not quite as overpowering as it was before, but it's tidied up a lot. And it still has that lovely Aerochrome look. So if we go back to our images here, we can see that this works extremely well. You know, way better than I thought it would. It looks like a near perfect rendition of Aerochrome. And this shot of the heron here, I think actually just looks even more awesome like this. And the deer shots look amazing as well. Now also, when it comes to video, I have no idea if this will work in log. I feel it might, because the channels are all in log anyway, so maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll screw up the IR removal process, I just don't know. Because I actually shot this on the Z6 using the in-camera flat setting and avoided using log because the camera doesn't have log internal. But that's it for Aerochrome video. Also, if you don't want to do all this processing and hassle, you can just use the Vision Aerochrome filter on a full spectrum camera. And while it does give you the red foliage Aerochrome look, it's not a true Aerochrome representation, and it can give you some odd results in a few situations. That being said, however, it is an amazing filter, and hats off to Vision for making it. You know, I have one and it works as advertised. Now, there are some other ideas I have for this process. I'm currently trying out a 550nm orange filter instead of using a yellow filter, which removes some green light, and seeing how that works. I actually really want to get this to work because makes a 550nm in-body filter for the Z6. So if I can get that to work, it means I can use that filter, and then I can use every lens I own and get that Aerochrome look. Lastly, I do need to say that my script works for my camera and filter. It might not work for you. This process is fiddly at best, so you'll have to tweak the process if you want to copy what I'm doing here. Anyway, that's how I'm creating true digital Aerochrome images using a full spectrum camera. It's quite a bit of a faff, but it is fun. Anyway, see you next time. transform these. Oh my God. Oh, the joys of trying to get Windows to recognize my microphone. Stop rolling away. My teleprompter thing is rolling away. It's annoying me.